and welcome to another episode of Canto per Canto. My name is Alberto Gelmi, and I'm a visiting assistant professor of Italian at Vassar College in Poughkeepsie, New York. I work on theories of prophecy in the Middle Ages, and especially on Bonaventure of Bagnoregio. I also work on Boccaccio.
And I am Filippo Fabbricatore. Hi, everyone. I'm a PhD student in comparative literature at the Graduate Center of the City University of New York, and an adjunct instructor at the College of Staten Island. My research focuses on Dante. Right now I'm working on Contrappasso and its reception. And let me say that I'm very glad to discuss Paradiso 9 with you, Alberto.
Same here, Filippo. Right, today we tackle Canto 9 of Paradiso. And this is where we're at. Dante and Beatrice have flown through the heaven of Moon and the heaven of Mercury. Canto 8 and Canto 9 instead take place under the sign of Venus. In fact, Carlo Martello works as a trade union between the two cantos. His speech starts at the end of Canto 8 and finishes in the first terzina of this canto. Just like the two preceding heavens, Il cielo di Venere maintains a persistent bond with planet Earth. Because here, too, l'ombra s'appunta che il vostro mondo face, the shadow that Earth projects, reaches up until this point. And indeed, the souls that we meet in the canto still very much carry their own shadows and their own terrestrial limitations. That is, in fact, the leading question of our discussion. What do a prince, a lustful woman, a poet turned into bishop, and a biblical prostitute have in common? And most importantly, why are they here talking love and politics? Before we meet our first soul, a quick help from Anna Maria Chiavacci Leonardi on this matter. In her introduction to Canto 8, she gives a simple and yet compelling explanation for the combination of love and poetry. She reminds us that, according to medieval astrology, there are two Venuses. One has a positive side that promotes peaceful coexistence. That is the more political, community-oriented side of Venus. The other aspect is the better-known erotic one, which pushes mankind to carnal love and, in a Christian perspective, sin. And love and politics are indeed present in the very first character, right, Filippo? Who is he?
Yes, he's Carlo Martello. Charles was the eldest son of Charles II of Anjou, and as such, he was destined for the kingdom of Naples City. However, that won't be the case because Carlo died very young, at the age of 24, in 1295. Just 1 year earlier, Dante met him in Florence, probably developing that sense of sympathy that still animates his representation in the sphere of Venus. To try to answer your question, Alberto, why is Charles here? Well, the text doesn't say that. Maybe he's here for having been impressed not by the erotic Venus, but by the political one, which, as you said, inspires good government. In this sense, it is not by accident that in Canto 8 Charles illustrates the effects of a bad administration. So, here is what we read at the beginning of Canto 9. We find a reference to the usurpation of the kingdom that Carlo's son will suffer on part of his uncle, Robert, followed by an invitation to Dante not to talk about that. But what catches the reader's attention is this address to Clemenza. Who is Clemenza? The use of the adjective bella and of the possessive tuoi and vostri suggests that she is Carlo's wife, not Carlo's daughter. Carlo's wife who died not long after him. This sudden shift seems to activate the memory of the most famous couple of lovers of the Commedia. Of course, I'm talking about Paolo and Francesca, with a significant reverse, given that these two new lovers are married and not adulterers. First, as Mark Belfort knows, the words Bella Clemenza seem to hint at a physical, earthly beauty, the same beauty that causes Paolo and Francesca's misadventures. Second, as Hermann Gömelin and Michelangelo Piccone pointed out, one has the impression that while Carlo is talking to Dante, Clemenza is close to her husband, thereby reproducing the same dynamic that we saw in Inferno 5. This interpretation is suggestive but hard to demonstrate. Anyway, we don't have so much time to think about that since a new soul immediately approaches Dante.
Right, that new soul being Cunizza da Romano. The encounter with her follows a rather traditional structure. First, Cunizza manifests herself as a bright light, signaling her intention to speak to the pilgrim. Un altro di quegli splendor ver me si face, il suo voler piacermi significava nel suo chieder di fuori. The camera pans to Beatrice, who gives a blessing, and then Dante addresses the question, addresses the soul, wishing that she could be a mirror for his own thoughts and questions. Fammi prova che io possa in te riflettere quel che penso. The image is a bit convoluted, but towards the end of the canto, of her speech actually, Cunizza says the same about angels who reflect God's wills and judgments to the blessed soul of paradise. Basically, there is a seamless flow of communication happening in heaven. In the following two terzine, the still nameless spirit situates herself in place and time. She comes from a wicked land, Terra Brava, which roughly speaking corresponds to present-day Veneto. Specifically, in that region there is a hill which is not too high, from which a sparkle came that caused a major fire. The spirit that is talking comes from the same household. Her name, as we finally know, is Cunizza da Romano, sister of Ezzelino III, who for his violence was punished by Dante, being plunged in the Phlegethon, the river of blood of Inferno 12. Cunizza doesn't say much about herself. She's here because the light of Venus won her over. Qui refulgo perché mi vinse il lume d'esta stella. These are the following statements that have actually puzzled critics for a long time. We know little about Cunizza, and even less we know about what Dante could have known about her. The chronicler Ronaldino lists 4 marriages, 2 passionate love affairs, and even a kidnapping organized by Cunizza's own brothers. What we know for sure is that in her old days, Cunizza was living in Florence, leading a less tumultuous life, and that she freed her slaves in 1265 in Cavalcante's house. And Roberto Norbedo wrote an interesting essay about the political astuteness behind this gesture. We also know that Cunizza died after 1279. Could Dante have heard about Cunizza in his adolescence? We're not sure. It seems likely that Dante could have known about her from Provençal sources, most notably from the biography, the so-called Vida, of a poet that Dante loved dearly, Sondello da Goito, whom we met in Canto 6 of Purgatorio. And Sondello da Goito was the one that perpetrated the kidnapping that we were talking about before. Sources present 2 rather different Cunizzas. On the one hand, we have a lustful woman that repents toward the end of her life. Instead, as Michelangelo Piccone has shown, the Provençal Vida portrays a typical domino of courtly love. Beautiful, fascinating, and already taken, married to somebody else. Still, there is a general agreement that Cunizza loved love, and she did so with pride, despite what people might think of her. Yes, Venus won her over, ma lietamente a me medesima indulgo la cagion di mia sorte, e non mi noia, che paria forse forte al vostro vulgo. One can hear the abysmal difference from Petrarch's opening sonnet in the Canzoniere, where he regrets, di me medesimo meco mi vergogno, I am ashamed of my own self. Quite to the contrary, Cunizza is not bothered at all by her past, regardless of what il vostro vulgo might think. But this is all we know about Cunizza's stories, because after that, she briefly points to the next soul, whose earthly renown gained him fame for centuries to come. And at this point, the conversation takes a completely different turn. There are people, Cunizza says, that forget that our time on earth will outlast us, for better or for worse. These people do not invest time nor energy in securing a worthy reputation for themselves. This is especially true for those who rule over the same land that Cunizza comes from, which this time is indicated by a slight variation of rivers, the Tagliamento and the Adige. But that soon will end, for punishment is rapidly approaching in 3 installments. First, a swamp near Padua will have its water tinted in blood. Second, some local lord in the Treviso area will be caught under a net that is being cast over him, which in the Italian is ragna. Third, a corrupted bishop, Empio suo pastor, will cry after shamefully betraying some citizens of Ferrara, which will cause a bloodbath beyond measure. And here Cunizza cuts her speech. How is it possible, though, that in just 40 lines we move from love and self-love to such a gruesome list of tragedies? Maybe the story of the next character can help us understand. His name is Folquet de Marseille. But who is he, Filippo?
Well, for us lovers of literature, he's above all a poet. Actually, he's the only poet that Dante places in paradise. Most likely, Dante has a special insight into the poems composed by him, by the troubadour, and most likely he read in the Vita that Folquetto abandoned court life and poetry to become the Bishop of Toulouse after the death of the Viscount of Marseille, Raymond Barral, and of his wife, the Domina, who was the inspiration for Folquet's love poems. We don't know if the fame which Cunizza alludes to is poetical or ecclesiastical. However, we know that Dante has a great esteem for the poet. We know that because Dante himself tells us so in the Vulgariloquentia, but also because he used Folquet's line to construct Arnaud's speech in Purgatorio 26. As Michelangelo Piccone underlines, the lyrical repertoire also inspires the images that here in Canto 9 announce the blessed soul. For example, Luculenta e cara gioia, that is how Cunizza introduced him, or of Fimbalasso, where the comparison with the precious stone not only highlights the excellence of the poetic experimentation of the troubadour, but specifies its source of inspiration, since the Balasso, as Alberto reminds, was the symbol of ardent love, and according to some lapidaries, it had the property of healing lustful thoughts. Also, the language of love poetry gives shape to the words inluiarsi, intuarsi, and immiarsi, even though here, of course, they refer to an interpenetration that isn't erotic, but spiritually purified. These are words never used before, and in doing so, Dante is glorifying poetry in its creative powers. At this point, I find an intuition by Piccone particularly precious. The idea that the reactivation of the cultural theme could indicate that the idealization of Folquet and his salvation passes through his own poetry and is possible because of his art. The line "S'io mi intuassi come tutti in me" may provide us with the reasons for this. I innude me as you meet you, as Hollander translates, alludes to a perfect ideological and sentimental correspondence between Dante and the blessed soul. In other words, it suggests that Dante places Folquetto in paradise to make him his own alter ego. The pivotal point is between the line 94 and 108. In finché si convenne al pelo, that is, as long as he was young, più non arse la figlia di Belo, né quella rodopea, né Alcide. That is, the love passions of Folquet were even more ardent than those of Dido, Phyllis, and Hercules. Three characters who, in ancient imagination, were emblematic of foolish and self-destructive love. The way the soul introduced himself, just a few lines before, had already informed us that Folquetto could overcome his juvenile phase when he was still in life. Indeed, he introduced himself as Folco, the name with which he was known as clergyman, and not as Folquetto, the name appearing in the Provençal collection, and that Dante still used in the Vulgariloquentia. It is significant that, like Cunizza, Folquetto doesn't blame himself for these misdirected loves. In some ways, the soul redeems himself by considering these experiences useful for his own process of self-recognition. He further explains that, in fact, divine virtue used the inclination of his nature to his advantage, removing him from these sinful loves at the later stage in his life. This sets many things straight. It is possible that one of the troubadour's lyrics, the 11th of the collection, inspired Dante in conceiving a metamorphosis that turned Folco from a herald of erotic poetry to a bishop that fought for the advancement of the church, as we are about to see with you. In this lyric, we may read that after the death of his beloved woman, Folquetto renounced to practice and to sing the sacred love and steered his existence towards the ultimate object of love, that is God. Now it's easier to understand how Dante aims to work in Folquetto's shoes. Following the death of the woman they loved, both poets were able to rise from an earthly love to a holy one, transforming their poetry from profane to salvific. That's why Folquetto is in paradise. Without this direction, he would be serving his sentence as a lustful soul in Purgatorio, along with Arnaut Daniel. One more thing, in Folquetto's poems, Dante could find also examples of militant poetry, as the troubadour wrote 2 cantos in support of the Crusades. This may have helped Dante turn the geographical axis of the canto towards the Holy Land, where now we move thanks to a new soul, who is Alberto.
You're right, Filippo. In fact, the geographical digression that Folquetto uses to introduce his homeland prepares the background for a different conversation. He speaks of discordanti lidi, that reminds us of Virgil's line, litora litoribus contraria, with which the Roman poet alluded in the Aeneid to the opposition between Carthage and Rome, a conflict that for him was sort of preparation for what was to come in centuries later. But it is through this reference that another character is introduced. And here the conversation turns again towards politics. So just as Cunizza introduced Folquetto introduces Rahab, a silent character. The only difference is that she doesn't speak in this passage. As per usual, she's very bright and like a ray of light in transparent water, we read. Even more so, Rahab sums up all the best of the heaven of Venus, to the point that she was the first one to be carried out of limbo when the Messiah in Inferno 4 intervened to rescue some of the worthy souls of limbo and that part of the Inferno. But what is Rahab's merit? In the book of Joshua in the Hebrew Bible, we learn that she's a prostitute who helps 2 Israelite spies that were dispatched to the land of Canaan to gather some intelligence. For support, Joshua rewards her with clemency and, we would say today, citizenship. Rabbinical and Christian exegetes salute Rahab as a heroine that paved the way for God's will. And specifically for Christians, Rahab is a prefiguration of the church, a former sinner that has now undergone redemption and can shine bright. For her actions, she deserves an award. In the Italian, we read palma. And just like in English, the word can also mean the palm of one's hand. And as a matter of fact, we read that Rahab's palma made it possible for the Christ to have his own victory with the 2 palms of his hand nailed to the cross. Her story, Folquetto concludes, Rahab's story, that is to say, could teach something to the sitting pope. And here we have the reference to the crusade. As you said, Filippo, there are several parallels between Cunizza and Folquetto.
Sure.
The previous one is that, the main one is that they led lives of pleasure that they later abandoned, but without showing any sign of remorse or shame. That, I would argue, is something that modern readers can sympathize with and maybe understand. It doesn't strike as something provokingly new. After all, that was what courtly love and courtly poetry was about, right? The clash between earthly drives and celestial duties. But as both Cunizza and Folquetto turn to politics, we are left puzzled. Cunizza's prophecies are graphic and merciless, and Folquetto's tirade against the Pope, and of course this is Dante's also Florence, is equally harsh in tone. Her bloom and her sarcasm seem at odds with the loving nature that we associate to Venus. Yes, Chiavacci Leonardi reminds us that there are 2 Venuses, right? A positive political one and the negative erotic one. But here the bad Venus aligns with the political Venus. It is there that we find violence and blood, not in the illicit loves of erotic Venus. Here instead we have peace and blissfulness. Am I right, Filippo?
Yes, but let's say that this is one of those cantos where the reader's expectations are somewhat disregarded, disappointed. I mean, we would expect to meet souls awarded for handling love appropriately. That kind of love that makes a man and a woman unit and procreate. Instead, as Lino Pertoli brilliantly explains in La Punta del Disio, the blessed souls we meet are not rewarded as heroes of earthly love, but as repentant or converted lovers. In other words, they are in the heaven of Venus, not because they have loved, but despite having loved. What could this positive model of earthly look like? Probably it would be the love of chaste spouses celebrated among the examples of virtue contrary to lust in Canto 25 of Purgatorio. Well, if we exclude the uncertain reference to clemenza at the beginning of this canto, there is no trace of this conjugal love here. Actually, there is no trace of it in the rest of Dante's production either, as poor Gemma Donati knows well.
Right.
If we look at Cunizza and Folquet through the filter of literary sources, it is clear that, along with the war, the protagonist of this canto is love poetry, of which Cunizza was an inspiration, the Folquet, a singer. Well, my impression is that in this canto, conjugal love is absent precisely because it's an element that is alien to the ecosystem of love literature in its medieval and courtly manifestation. Dante probably wants to assign a special place to this kind of literature on a wide providential trajectory. To do so, he must combine two conflicting dimensions, as Marco Sant'Agata explains well. On the one hand, we have Christian ethics, which condemn adultery without factoring in love. On the other hand, we have a kind of literature which gives value and importance to the desires of each individual, singing a love that cannot be adulterous, since each marriage is prearranged, on the basis of political or financial profits. It is an impossible synthesis, unless Dante hides the term of the dispute under the carpet. Maybe it is no coincidence that in the Commedia the only references to marriage are implicit and not so positive. Think of Francesca, Chia de Tolomei, Piccarda Donati. Nor is it a coincidence that the canto ends with the word adulterio. The context transposes the concept onto a new level, that of the union of the church with Christ, the only marriage spoken of in paradise. But Dante talks about that in another canto, and we can listen to it in another video.
Absolutely. And as a matter of fact, this was fun. And thank you, Filippo, for sharing all your knowledge. And thanks to Alison Cornish for organizing this and for having us in this YouTube channel. And please go listen to all the others 99 cantos that are left. Also, many thanks to Giulia Romagnoli for helping us with the technology. Thank you again, Filippo. Nice talking to you, and see you soon.
Thank you. See you soon. Bye.
Bye.